We hear a lot about censorship in places like Canada, Australia, Europe, but I bet you didn't know that there's a lot more censorship going on right now in Mexico, where I'm from and where I live, and I want to tell you about it. We're trying to get to 300 subscribers, so if you want to help us do that, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and also comment what you think after you actually hear about this insane story. Today, we're going to talk about a topic that has stirred up a lot of controversy in Mexico in the past few weeks: the disaster surrounding one of our most famous football players, or soccer for the Americans, Javier Chicharito Hernandez, and his comments about gender roles. Let's look at what he said, why he said it, and why I think he shouldn't have apologized, which he did very recently, let alone have been sanctioned by and censored by the Mexican Football League and called out by the president herself. So, as we see here, and in one headline of many, former LA Galaxy captain Chicharito Hernandez responds to backlash over sexist remarks, and this is basically the way that it has been framed, not only here nationally in our national media and newspapers, but also internationally, when what he actually said were just traditional conservative values and views that used to not make these kinds of headlines just a few years ago, especially here in Mexico. We're also going to compare this case to the Harrison Butker case in the United States and take an overall look at what's happening in Mexico with toxic feminism, which is just feminism in my opinion, period, and censorship disguised as equality or equity. Many of you may not even know that right now Mexico is under a feminist quasi-dictatorial regime first installed by former President AMLO, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, and his relatively new party Morena, now furthered by his successor, our first female president, Claudia Sheinbaum. It all started when Chicharito uploaded a couple of videos to his social media, his personal social media, where he talked about gender roles and family. He said things like women are failing, eradicating masculinity, making society hypersensitive, and that they should embody their feminine energy by taking care of the home and letting a man lead them. He also uttered a line that hit the nail in the head and stung many of these empowered women to the core. You want a man who provides, but cleaning is patriarchal oppression? Interesting. And of course, these words unleashed a tsunami of criticism, from his female counterparts for Club Chivas Femenil players to the liberated women who wouldn't even bother watching one of the former's matches, to President Claudia Sheinbaum herself, calling him very sexist. The Mexican Football Federation, FMF for short, fined him for media violence and promoting dangerous sexist stereotypes. Even Puma, one of his sponsors, distanced itself and gave a whole thing and put out a whole thing on social media explaining why. But what's behind these comments? What Chicharito said didn't come out of nowhere. His ideas are rooted in religious and cultural concepts that have shaped Mexico for centuries, which you probably thought were still the norm, but are quickly being eroded by ideology. The Catholic religion, which still remains a huge force in the country, everywhere except in the government and amongst the ruling elite, has always promoted these clear roles of men as providers and women as pillars of the home. This isn't new, it's always been there. The Bible, for example, speaks of the complementarity between men and women, where each has a role that is focused on strengthening the family as a whole. And there's a reason for that. And even though I am not religious myself, I value and understand that the loss of traditional Western religion doesn't mean it no longer exists, but rather that it's being replaced by new religions without foundations and with very flexible values and morals, which destroy societies that I got to witness firsthand while I lived in Canada for the past 13 years. And now, Mexico has changed. In recent decades, we've seen how feminism in its most radical form has gained strength. There's a toxic feminism that seems to want to erase differences between men and women, as you probably well know and have lived through it yourself, labeling any traditional idea as machista or machism or sexist. Chicharito, with his comments, obviously struck a chord. What happens when you question this new religion of radical feminism? They cancel you, they censor you, they fine you, they force you to apologize, and this coming from the even highest pillar of the country, President Claudia Sheinbaum herself, who took the time during her daily morning press conference to scold him as if he were a small child. Misplaced motherhood, anyone? For being too macho and too sexist, forgetting that in this country she so proudly governs, 89.9% of the population still practice some form of religion, with Catholicism being practiced by 77.7% of the total population, according to the latest figures that I was able to find at least. And then all the other institutions came out to virtue signal, as they always do, about inclusion and diversity and the importance of women and females and etc. The Mexican Football Federation fined Chicharito, saying his comments constituted media violence and went against gender equality. Chivas, his current soccer team, also distanced itself, as did the Puma brand, as I mentioned. In the end, Chicharito bent the knee, which is his biggest mistake, and posted an apology on Instagram saying, "I deeply regret any confusion or discomfort. It was never my intention to limit, hurt, or divide." And here's the problem. Why did he have to apologize? That was his one and only mistake, in my opinion. His comments didn't incite violence. They weren't a personal attack against anybody or a group of people. They were an opinion based on his beliefs and, yes, on a conservative view of gender roles, which is the one we all used to know and used to, respect until very recently. The FMF's sanction is excessive, obviously, a form of censorship that punishes freedom of expression. In a country where everyone claims to love democracy and everybody always talks about how important it is, there's a never-ending touting of its importance. It seems you can only have an opinion if you follow just the current religion of radical feminism, and this isn't equality, it's imposing an ideology and turning you into an apostate if you speak up. Feminism creeped in as a way to counteract real violence against women in the country, but as it always does, it forgot about equality and has become about total dominance in all aspects of life. It has now even been used to use the power of the law and the power of the state to censor women themselves as well, with the recent story of an ex-user, Carla Estrella, a citizen who criticized a female representative from the current party in power, Morena. She was then sanctioned by the Electoral Institute for Political Gender Violence and forced to apologize publicly by posting the same apology from her ex account for 30 days straight. A very clear and, to an extent, ridiculous example of feminist laws being used as tools for censorship. And let's not forget that something very similar happened during the so-called Cultural Revolution of a certain communist country, where we now see the effects of this type of thinking taking place and being installed within the government itself. So that's the current climate right now here in Mexico. And now let's compare this with Harrison Butker. In case you don't remember, he was a player for the Kansas City Chiefs in the NFL in the States. In May 2024, Butker gave a speech at a Catholic university where he spoke about the importance of family and traditional roles and criticized modern feminism. He said that many women do find happiness in being wives and mothers, and that men should be leaders in their homes. Sound familiar? The initial reaction was very similar to what happened with Chicharito recently. They called him sexist, misogynistic, and backward, but Butker didn't apologize. He explained his position and made it clear that he came and was coming from his Christian values, and that while he respected other views, he wasn't going to back down. The result, well, many men and women, and not just conservatives, ended up supporting him, if merely to just uphold the classical liberal importance of free speech. His speech resonated with those who believe that gender roles are not oppression, but a natural form of complementarity. Butker didn't capitulate, and that earned him respect. But now, Chicharito, on the other hand, gave in to the pressure. And I don't blame him entirely. The cancellation machine in Mexico is brutal and getting worse every day that goes by. His apology was a total surrender to an ideology that doesn't tolerate dissent, when that's what's most needed today. That's people that stand firm in their convictions and actually, stand for what they speak. And let's be clear, toxic feminism, in my view, all feminism really does not seek equality. It's a movement that attacks any idea that doesn't fit its narrative, labeling anything that has a hint of tradition or religion or even common sense as machista or misogynistic and sexist. In Mexico, we've seen this movement gain ground, sometimes replacing long-held values that you probably still thought we had with a new orthodoxy. If you say that women can enjoy taking care of their families or that men have a clear leadership role, you're shouted down with labels of oppressor, anti-feminist, anti-woman, violent, radical, conservative. This isn't freedom, it's censorship that has come in through the back door, pushed by the globalization of ideology, and where it has now found a safe haven, and it keeps finding these safe havens within the global south while it waits for the US to recapitulate after the next 4 years, and what they hope to happen festering in the background in places like over here. Chicharito didn't call to harm anyone, he didn't discriminate, he simply expressed the conservative view shared by the vast majority of Mexicans, except for the ideologically driven elites. The FMF's sanction and the pressure to apologize sent a clear message. You can't express an opinion if you don't follow the proper or correct narrative. And this is extremely dangerous, and citizens here seem to be oblivious to the fact that absolute freedom of speech is the foundation of any free society, if we ever want to call ourselves that again. If we can't debate ideas, then, well, what are we left with? The Chicharito controversy leaves us with several lessons. First, traditional ideas, whether based on religion or culture, are not automatically bad. Second, censorship disguised as equality is killing free thought and debate in Mexico. And third, I wish Chicharito had followed Harrison Butker's example, defending his beliefs without bowing down to the mob. Having done so only proves that this leadership role he espoused and talked so greatly of was just all talk, that he didn't believe in it enough to defend it himself and to defend himself from the mob. So that just shows that his values weren't just really there as much as he wanted to make it seem. And in the end, that is the example he's leaving for his children, aside from having divorced their mother and leaving them with an outcome half as good if they worked through it and kept the family stable, but that's a whole other issue. So no, although I am against censorship and in favor of absolute freedom of speech and agree with his view of gender roles, I am not going to defend him if he doesn't have the courage to defend himself. Please don't forget to subscribe, we are trying to get this channel monetized and we'd love to do it alongside you. So that's the level of censorship here in Mexico and the reason why we're trying to speak out against it.